Gao Tu had always known that life demanded resilience, but he had never imagined just how fragile that resilience could be. Each morning, waking up felt like a small victory, as though the mere act of opening his eyes against the pounding pain and constant nausea was an achievement. His body had changed in ways that scared him, ways that made every breath feel heavy, every movement feel like a battle he could barely win. The pregnancy, once a quiet and secret hope nestled within him, had now become a relentless storm, threatening to shatter not only his body but the very core of his being. The doctor's words replayed in his mind over and over. Without an alpha, without proper care, this pregnancy is extremely dangerous. One wrong step could cost you your life. Gao Tu's heart clenched every time he remembered them, but he had no one to lean on, no one to protect him except the small life growing inside him. Even sitting felt like a monumental task. Gao Tu often found himself slumped on the floor, pressing a hand against his swollen abdomen, willing the child inside him to stay calm, to stay safe. Every flutter, every tiny kick, felt like a lifeline, a fragile thread tethering him to hope. But that hope came at a cost. Nights were the worst. Pain racked his body in unpredictable waves, leaving him gasping, shivering, and drenched in sweat. The suppressants he had relied on for years had weakened him, leaving him more vulnerable than ever. And yet he had continued taking them, believing that hiding his Omega nature was worth the risk. He had believed that his devotion to Wenling, to the man who had unknowingly fathered his child, was worth all the danger. Now, every day he questioned that belief as his body groaned under the strain. The apartment, once a place of refuge, had transformed into a prison. Each creak of the floorboards, each distant sound of the city below, reminded him of the fragility of life. He moved cautiously, calculating each step, each action, as though one wrong movement could end everything. Even eating became a complicated routine, balancing nourishment with conserving energy and avoiding sudden jolts that could trigger pain. Meals were small, measured, and deliberate, often eaten slowly on the edge of exhaustion, his hand never leaving the child's tiny home in his abdomen. Sometimes, he whispered to the life inside him, speaking softly, "Stay with me. Don't leave me now. I can't lose you." His voice was hoarse, trembling, but he spoke anyway, clinging to the fragile bond that tethered him to hope. Gao Tu's mind, always so sharp, became a battlefield of fear and determination. He thought constantly about Wenling, the man he had loved silently for over a decade, the man who had never known the depth of his feelings. The thought that Wenling had unknowingly put him in this position, fathering his child without realizing it, filled him with a mixture of longing, frustration, and helplessness. He wanted to run to Wenling, to tell him everything, to cry out for comfort and safety, but he could not. Distance, secrecy, and the danger of exposing his Omega nature forced him to endure in silence. Every thought of Wenling became bittersweet, a reminder of love and the reality of solitude. As the weeks passed, the physical toll became unbearable. Pain would strike without warning, sharp and unpredictable, leaving him breathless and trembling. Nausea and dizziness became constant companions, and fatigue weighed down his limbs like lead. Each contraction, each pang, reminded him of the stakes. He could lose the child, or worse, he could lose himself. He often curled into a ball on the floor, holding his abdomen, tears streaming down his face as he whispered to the life inside him, promising protection and love no matter the cost. He knew he was risking everything, but the child's life had become more important than his own. Isolation pressed down like a heavy blanket, suffocating and relentless. Gao Tu had no one to confide in, no one to share the burden with. Friends had drifted away, unaware of the danger he faced, and Wenling, the person he desired most, was unaware of the depth of his suffering. Even the city outside, alive with motion and noise, felt distant and unreachable, as though he existed in a separate world where pain, fear, and endurance were constant companions. He learned to move carefully, to manage every ache, and to speak only to the child growing within him. Each whispered word, each soft lullaby, was a plea for survival, a hope that both he and the child would make it through this nightmare. Despite the suffering, there were moments of fragile hope. Every flutter, every subtle movement of the child became a reminder of why he endured. The life inside him was not just a responsibility, it was proof that love could exist even in the harshest conditions, that hope could flourish even in isolation. These small miracles, brief and delicate, gave him strength to rise again after each wave of pain, to push through exhaustion, and to endure the relentless strain of pregnancy. Each heartbeat inside him was a reason to survive, a reason to keep fighting, no matter the cost. Yet fear never left him. Gao Tu constantly imagined the worst scenarios, collapsing alone, losing the child, or waking one day to find that all hope was gone. The fear was almost paralyzing, gripping his chest and leaving him gasping for air. Each night, he would lie awake, listening to the faint sounds of the city, imagining the life that could be lost if he faltered. He whispered to the child, promising protection, imagining a future where they could both survive, where love could exist without fear or secrecy. Each whisper became a lifeline, a fragile tether to hope amidst the unrelenting storm of his reality. Every day was a test of endurance. Gao Tu measured his movements, timed his meals, and monitored his energy levels with the precision of a soldier on a battlefield. Even the smallest action, like rising from a chair or walking across the room, became a calculated risk. He could feel his body weakening, muscles trembling, joints aching under the relentless strain. And yet, he persevered, because surrender was not an option. The life growing inside him depended entirely on his strength, his vigilance, and his will to survive. Emotional pain compounded the physical strain. Gao Tu's heart ached for Wenling, for the comfort and security he could never have in this time of crisis. Memories of Wenling, the gentle touches, the unspoken glances, the moments of shared laughter tormented him with their impossibility. He longed to confess, to reach out, to be held and reassured, but secrecy demanded silence. Every thought of Wenling became a bittersweet torture, a reminder of love unfulfilled and the danger that surrounded them both. The isolation was complete, yet he clung to it as protection, believing that exposing his vulnerability would risk everything. Even in the darkest moments, Gao Tu found small sources of strength. The child's movements, tiny and subtle, became proof that perseverance was meaningful. Each flutter was a reminder that life could persist against all odds, that love and hope were not entirely lost. Gao Tu would press his hands to his swollen belly, whispering promises of protection and love, drawing courage from the very life that demanded his survival. Every contraction, every ache, every trembling heartbeat became a measure of his determination, a testament to the bond between parent and child. And so, day after day, Gao Tu endured. The pregnancy pushed him beyond every limit, tested every ounce of courage, and demanded sacrifices unimaginable to those who had never known his struggle. Yet through pain, isolation, and fear, he persevered, driven by hope, love, and the knowledge that surrender would mean losing everything that mattered. He faced each day with fragile strength, aware of the risks, yet determined to survive for the sake of the life growing inside him. The days had blurred into nights, and Gao Tu felt as though he was living in a haze of pain and fear. Every step, every breath was a reminder of how close he was to the edge. His body trembled constantly, and even the act of standing brought him to his knees, gasping for air. Yet through it all, he clung to the child within him, pressing his hands to his swollen belly and whispering promises of love and protection. He imagined the life they would share, the moments of joy, the laughter, simple days that felt impossibly distant now. Each tiny flutter, each subtle movement, was a reminder that he could not give up, not now, not ever. Isolation pressed down on him like a suffocating weight. Gao Tu missed Wenling more than he could bear. He longed to hear his voice, to feel his presence, to be reassured that he was not alone in this world. But he could not risk it. The truth of his Omega nature and the child he carried had to remain hidden. So he endured silently, speaking only to the life inside him. "Stay strong," he whispered, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I will not let anything harm you." I will fight for you. For us, for the love we deserve. In those quiet moments, Gao Tu discovered the depth of his own courage. He had faced countless challenges, but this fragile life he carried against all odds was the greatest test of all. Pain, fear, and exhaustion were constant companions, but hope burned brighter than ever. No matter how close he came to losing himself, he held on. Each heartbeat, each flutter, was a promise that he and his child would survive. That love could endure even in the darkest of nights. And in that small, fragile hope, Gao Tu found the strength to keep moving forward, one breath, one step, one heartbeat at a time.